Let me ask you something before we start the story. Where are you viewing from tonight? Are you listening under the stars on a long journey, sitting quietly on a porch, or snuggled up in an apartment in the city? Put it in the remarks. Where in the world are you when this narrative makes its way into your heart? It has been snowing for the past 2 days. It felt heavy, ponderous, and thick, as if the world was attempting to forget itself. It covered every root, tree, and rock until the entire prairie sounded like a mourner's hymn. Without hurrying, Silas Claiborne rode through it. He held a rein slack in one hand while keeping the other close to the revolver he hadn't used in years. There was nothing he was searching for. Just peace and wood. Just an excuse to avoid returning to that chilly cottage where the baby no longer wailed. No fire ever felt warm enough, and no wife ever sang. Then he heard a gentle, faint sound that sounded almost like a calf mooing and wasn't associated with the snow. However, when he approached, behind the powder and pine roots, he noticed a youngster who was still partially frozen and no longer sobbing. There's no more strength for that. Perhaps because she was clothed in frost-hardened buckskin? Her eyes were open, her lips blue, and she didn't shed a tear. However, something in Silas Claiborne that had long been rusted shut was broken when she gazed at him. He lowered himself to one knee in the white after slowly dismounting. He remained silent. He didn't have to. He reached forward as she blinked. She didn't flinch or even tremble when he lifted her up. Pressing her against his chest, he covered her in his duster. Compared to his saddle pack, she was lighter. He got back on his horse. Then, as if the world didn't want him to talk to her, the wind blew harder, but he did. The entire trip home, she remained silent. The roof of Silas's cabin, which had substantial timbers, drooped in the snow. It had an odor of smoke, dust, and something that had been left unburned for too long. He boiled roots he hardly knew the names of, stoked the hearth, placed her next to it, and got water from the barrel. She remained silent. He continued talking as if she was listening without posing any questions. Told her about his former dog, the horse that broke his ribs in the spring of last year, and the scent of his wife's hair when she leaned on his back during Sunday dinner. The word daughter, which hung between them like winter breath, was never spoken by him. By evening she was toasty. Once more her lips went pink. In her slumber, her hand extended and coiled around his finger. All night long he remained motionless and watched her as if he was worried that the snow might reach inside and reclaim her. She was walking by the third day, no words yet. However, she plunged her hands in the pail of water, grinned at his dog's former bedroom, and even burst out laughing when Silas spilled molasses on his shirt. Little Fawn is the name he gave her. Before he even got off his horse, the rumors began to circulate in town. The storekeeper whispered, "Comanche child," and gave him a tin of beans as if they were burning his palm. Savages never forget. The preacher's wife snarled and shook her head so violently that her bonnet almost fell off. Silas did not respond or provide an explanation. After purchasing what he required, he departed. A skinned rabbit was affixed to his barn door that evening. Without saying a word, he burnt it. Little Fawn got stronger every day. She rushed through the snow barefoot as if it were her natural habitat. As if she knew them, she ascended to the porch railing, gazed up at the stars, and pointed. Using the same pine that housed his wife's cross, Silas constructed a cradle for her. He gave her an old linen doll and carved a bird into the headboard. Every night she put it under her cover. At times she would gaze at him with her large, brown eyes, not frightened or disoriented, simply observing as though considering whether he intended to stay. She gave him a single feather one morning, put it in his hand, then scuttled into his lap and rested her head on his chest. Silas Claiborne had not sobbed since the burial had closed until that moment. On the 8th day the riders arrived. 5 Comanche, silent, painted, and broad-shouldered. They moved about the home like hungry wolves. 1 dismounted with gray, red elk strewn throughout his hair, higher than the others. He gazed at Silas. "We left her to the spirits," he murmured, turning to face the girl. Silas remained still. Tiny Fawn held on to his leg. "They thought she was gone," Red Elk continued. However, she is breathing once more now. We arrived to pick her up. No, Little Fawn replied. Her first words were a breath, a whisper. Red Elk blinked. Silas did as well. She repeated it, this time with more volume. No, like a stone into a quiet lake, the phrase dropped into the snow. Red Elk glanced at her before turning back to Silas. Then a woman moved forward behind the others. Will Moon, with 2 long braids of black hair and a scar that runs like a lightning bolt down her cheek. She simply knelt next to Little Fawn and cuddled her face without saying anything. After returning the stare, the youngster cautiously extended his hand to touch the scar. Willa winced. She knows you, Silas murmured softly. Will got up. I am her aunt. Red Elk gave one nod. When he said, 3 nights, take her to the blaze. Let her spirit make the decision. Like ghosts, they turned and galloped away. Willa was the only one who remained. There was a lot of silence for the next 2 days. Willa observed Silas chopping wood, feeding the goats, and dressing the girls' foot after she stepped on a thorn. She said less words than he did. However, there was always something unsaid when their gazes locked. Not yet, not with warmth, but not with hate either. Little Fawn drew in the ashes that night. 3 stick figures with their hands together. Willett turned his head away. They rode to the clearing, where the tribe was waiting, on the 3rd day. The fire blazed brightly. Like urchins seeking lost souls, smoke rose. Between them sat a little fawn. Willis held one hand as Silas held the other. The Red Elk moved forward. He claimed to be a child of 2 worlds. We respect your return and your breath. Where does your spirit belong, we ask now? The wind slowed. The fire crackled. Little Fawn glanced up at Silas after first looking at Willa. She seized both of their hands as she moved forward. Both, not just one. The audience gasped like leaves. In a windstorm, tears filled Willa's eyes. After a lengthy moment of staring, Red Elk nodded. Then he claimed she was part of the fire. And the fire belongs to both. He looked across at Silas. You own her. But her people are too. You wed her aunt. You wed us. Silas gave Willa a look. She didn't recoil. Simply gazed into his eyes as if she had lost too much to have any hope left. Willa, however, only nodded once when Little Fawn tugged her skirt, and that was sufficient. That spring, they got married. Just the wind, the youngster in between, and a row of feathers dangling from the porch beamed no bells, no preacher. Her. Mother's beads were worn by Willa. Silas put on his worn boots. Little Fawn flung petals from the cottonwood and clapped. Silas continued to grasp his wife's hand even though some people in the town still spat at him when he passed. And Little Fawn held on to both of them at all times. Let me tell you what really counts if you're still here, still listening, still holding your breath as if the world would stop for the final snowfall. Your blood isn't the cause. When no one else would, you save their breath. The goal of Silas Claiborne was not to become a parent once more. Did not request a tribe. Didn't plead for affection. Someone cried without making a sound, so he simply reached into the snow. He was also unable to ride on, and that's all it takes sometimes. An outstretched hand, silently, a doll whittled. A cradle made of sorrow. They judged him. They made fun of him. He was by himself. But rather than offering shame, he offered soup, gave warmth rather than conflict, and he was given their strongest woman and their utmost faith by the tribe that would have previously scalped a man like him. Because he didn't fight, not because he did. You see, we don't need any more horse-riding heroes in this world. More kneeling males are needed. More women who accept scars. There are more kids that prefer love to blood. Therefore, if you're listening outside, whether it's in the snow or the stars, keep in mind that what you save in silence can end up saving you, as well as what the world discards. It can occasionally become your only source of warmth when everything else fails, therefore don't ignore the cry. Pause, listen, and respond. Someone who has nothing left to lose can end up adopting you as family, and you will be complete at that point.